philology, forensics, ecology. These are just a few of the scientific fields united through the use of one common tool, the subfield of systematics known as phylogenetics. Scientists construct phylogenetic diagrams to map evolutionary relationships and better understand life's diversity.
One cannot understand biology except in an evolutionary context.
In the second half of the 20th century, scientific advances revolutionized phylogenetic techniques, uncovering a new approach to the study of evolution and revising our understanding of life on Earth. Patterns abound in nature. We seek to understand the world around us by studying such patterns. But like the flat meditation garden, we can also impose man-made patterns to try to find natural ones. Another example, phylogenetic diagrams that help us organize and classify the various forms of life on Earth. They reveal telling patterns of information about how organisms are related to each other and how they have evolved over time. Further, exciting advances in molecular biology have uncovered patterns at a different level. A's, C's, G's, and T's arranged to encode an organism's genetic makeup. In most cases, genetic data lend support to the diagrams designed with morphological characteristics in mind. In other cases, not. But in every case, we use them to learn more about relationships and the past that has led to those relationships.
Classification traditionally has been about putting things together that look alike. In our refrigerators, we put the eggs in one place and we put the milk in another place, generally to organize it. And we might have skim milk and whole milk, but we put the milk together. So in our daily lives and in biological science, we put things together that seem to be alike.
This is kind of interesting.
Philip Gingrich of the University of Michigan has been asking, where did whales come from? How did this mammal evolve to live in the water? And how is it related to those that live on land? To develop possible answers to these questions, there are two kinds of diagrams Gingrich can construct. A cladogram maps relationships by comparing the number of character differences between organisms. But as a paleontologist, Gingrich considers the appearance of these differences over time. So he uses the more traditional diagram, the phylogenetic tree. It offers a different perspective on how this is related to this.
Phylogeny, it's a metaphor referring to the venation in a leaf and the idea that life started with a single stem and then has branched into all that you see in the venation in a leaf. So it's to give a sense of a tree-like or leaf-like structure of the history. Phylogenetic reconstruction is trying to put together a venation-like picture that shows how the animals living today and the animals that lived in the past are connected to each other. If there are ancestors, they would be on the same vein, and if they're what we call sister taxa, they would be at the terminal branches of the different veins.
Gingrich used the fossils of modern whales and their prehistoric ancestors to analyze physical changes in the cetacean order.
We start with observations. We start with what we can see. We break things down into their smallest characteristics and then analyze these by comparing them with each other to find the most parsimonious possible history we could use to explain the distribution of characteristics. It's important to understand that the word phylogeny is used in the traditional sense going back to the 19th century of a branching diagram starting from a stem with the branches separating up through time. Time is an axis of a phylogeny. This is the way that we represent the pattern of evolution graphically. It's like drawing the positions of the continents on a map or something. And we plot something about the morphology against time.
Gingrich relied on this graphic diagramming technique to try to figure out how an order of mammals had evolved to live in the ocean. In the 1960s, paleontologists like Gingrich believed they had figured out the evolutionary history of whales. Their conclusions, represented by a phylogenetic diagram, were based on the fossil record of the time. They proposed that the cetacean order, starting with the Archaeoceti, or archaic whales, evolved from a group called the Mesonychids. But because the fossil evidence was scanty, not all researchers bought this idea. Some thought archaic whales evolved from a different group, one that also gave rise to hoofed land mammals like hippos.
For the last 20 years, I've been really consumed by the idea that we have to find all of the links, all of the transitional forms from whales living today back into the transition from land, back into the land mammals. This idea about mesonychids being at the base of whales has been a good one, but we've long known that what would cement it would be finding the ankle bones of early whales. There are two parts of a mammal that are most informative about what it's related to. One are the teeth, and the second one are the ankle bones, because they're complicated. They preserve well as fossils. They're dense bones. They bear a lot of weight.
So, Gingrich searched the Valley of the Whales in Pakistan, hoping to find ankles that link cetaceans to mesonychids, and show that they are indeed most closely related to each other.
If we could find those, we could corroborate, I thought, the idea that archaic whales evolved from mesonychids.
Molecular researchers disagree. Those who give precedence to molecular data say even with the prized fossil, this picture of whale evolution would be inconclusive. They argue DNA evidence should be considered whenever possible in phylogenetic reconstruction. The very nature of DNA makes it a document of evolutionary history. It's a molecular record from parent to offspring. Comparisons of the DNA sequences of organisms provide a perspective on relationships unavailable if only fossils are studied. Since species evolve by the gradual accumulation of mutations, the amount of nucleotide sequence difference between a pair of different genomes should indicate how recently those two genomes, and therefore species, shared a common ancestor. To determine proper relationships, researchers compare the data of no less than 3 different organisms. They scan thousands of base pairs to identify points of divergence in the sequence. Base pairs that differ among all 3 organisms are excluded from the data set. Researchers then compare the remaining nucleotides to determine which 2 sequences are most similar. The 2 species with the most matches are most closely related. While Gingrich is convinced he can find the ankle that's shaped just right to link whales with the extinct mesonychids, molecular data work against him, supporting the opposing view of whale evolution.
Our molecular colleagues have been increasingly strident that whales and artiodactyls have to be closely related. And they even think that they can see where whales came out of the artiodactyls, and they propose that hippos are the group that's closest to the ancestry of whales. But I never fully believed it because molecular people can't see groups that are extinct, and it would be very easy for mesonychids to be in the middle and them not to be able to see them just looking at living animals. So I started in Pakistan looking for these. And finally, in the year 2000, we found whales that the predators didn't steal the hands and feet and tails, and we found that the ankles of whales are not like mesonychids. And I can tell you that for the first week after finding this in the field, I was in denial because I couldn't believe that the ankle bones are exactly like artiodactyls. I couldn't believe it.
Gingrich's new fossil corroborated the very hypothesis he was trying to refute.
Mesonychids are out of the picture, and whales and artiodactyls connect to each other Mesonychids are still there somewhere on the side, but they're not part of this story. In this case now, the fossil evidence supports, yes, a connection of whales and artiodactyls without any mesonychids at the base. And so our molecular colleagues are telling us many answers, none of which we can fully believe because we don't have evidence from fossils that tie them together too. So this is a very special case to be able to tie the groups together with fossils too. It's what we've been working to get for all these groups, and at least now we've got it for one.
Paleontologists finally agreed upon a phylogenetic diagram for the cetacean order when molecular data and morphology matched up. But when comparing microorganisms,